And so women out there who are, struggling, having questions, or doing well, joining organizations is critical because people are going to advocate for you. You feel like, again, it helps to give you power. So I was glad that Melanie joined us. I'm glad that Joia, Jefferson Nuri is about to join us as well, an executive leadership coach. Joia, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you are very welcome, Denise. And I do want to amen what Melanie said about you being in the community. You have redefined what Thomas Jefferson was called the third estate, the fourth estate, the fourth estate, and its role and its responsibility to the democracy. And you have really stayed true to that because you're supposed to be the people's ears.
Right.
And that's how it was defined in the Constitution. And you have been true to that and not partisan, just truth driven. And I commend you and your father before you
Yes.
for staying true to your role in the democracy.
Thank you, Joy. I really appreciate that. And one of the things I'm trying to get us to, those of us in the press, to stop from doing, and that is calling ourselves the voice of the Black community. The
No.
Black community has its own voice.
Yes.
Like you said, we're the ear.
You're
Right.
the ear. You're the ear, not the voice.
And our job is to amplify those voices.
Yes.
So and from someone whose background is in media, and now you've transitioned, I guess. We'll talk a little bit about that. I really appreciate those compliments. So thank you. But you're now an executive coach and certified by the International Coaching Federation.
Yes.
What does an executive coach do? An executive leadership coach do?
Well, first, the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, is the most revered certification program in the world. And I chose it because of its global respect and how hard it was to get this credential. There are people who get credentials because they go to weekend programs.
I've seen that.
18-month graduate program. And so I just had to do that work. And I couldn't believe I had to actually do book reports again. It's like, oh my God, a book report. And
you said to yourself, did I ask for this?
Yeah. But what I learned was positive psychology. I learned how the prefrontal lobe of the brain works and how it relates to your life. And so I got a very detailed training on how your psyche works and how you respond to that, how your physical responds to that. A leadership coach, and I'm an executive leadership coach, is here to ask you the powerful questions that allow you to get past your false upper limits into where you want to be. And I am honored to say that in the years I've been doing this for more than a decade. I did the media for 30 years, but for more than a decade, I have been doing this. And I couldn't figure out why white women never hired me. I had 2 white men in this whole decade, 11 years. No women ever hired me. And about a year and a half ago, I said, oh, this is my calling. Oh, I'm not to resist this.
No.
I wasn't sweating it, but it did cross my mind.
Yeah.
One Black woman would tell another Black woman. And then I shifted the wording to being women of color because some of my clients were Puerto Rican backgrounds. They would come. And I shifted it to women of color. And now I have a client in India and a client in Thailand.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so it feels like it was a calling to be of service to women of color. So what I do is I work with them, and they're either already running their own entrepreneurial piece, or they want to be a CEO somewhere in corporate America, or they're wanting to be a CEO and transition back to being an entrepreneur. And I help you get past your limits. You mentioned in the introduction, moving you from your zone of excellence to your zone of genius, because we're all excellent. But are we doing it with peace and calm and strategy? Probably not. In your zone of genius, it's like a nice dance. You glide through. And when you hit a rough patch, you have the ability to center yourself, to come back to your center and find your peace and work your strategy. And that's what happens in the zone of genius. And if I can continue here, you don't reach your zone of genius because of your inner critic,
Mm.
voice in your head that is constantly telling you what you're not. And the prefrontal lobe of your brain is the last part of the brain to develop, and it is constantly comparing. So it compares
Mm.
you to your past. It compares you to Jane over there. It compares you to him. It compares you and constantly diminishes you. We all get this start of this somewhere between the ages of 6 and 13. Some of us generally about 6 and 8. That something happens that shakes your confidence. It could be something
Mm.
innocent, like an aunt telling you to know your place and be careful out there, which makes you recoil, or it could be something malicious, a sexual abuse, somebody telling you your hair is ugly or that your skin is too dark. And then we play that in our heads throughout the rest
Over.
of our lives.
Mhm.
We play it throughout the rest of our lives. And we actually think because it's the first thought, it's the wisdom thought. You can't get that house, you won't get that job. It's not the wisdom thought. It is the inner critic thought. So when we learn to know when she's talking, then we are able to build a toolkit to shut her up.
You know, Joy, it's interesting. I will confess, when my dad passed, and I was going through a lot of anxiety at the time. So I sought a therapist, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things he used to ask me all the time about, the things that I would talk to him about, was, why are you having those thoughts? And oh, because of this, and that's why I'm here talking to you, and blah blah blah. And he said, but why do you think thoughts that hurt you? And I thought,
Mm,
hmm. He said, why do you think thoughts that hurt you?
yeah,
And I'm like, yeah. I mean, it took me several years for that to sink in,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, I'm paying you to fix me. But I realized it was here.
No,
And
you have
so,
to fix you or
yeah,
or
yeah.
reimagine you. Your therapist was great. I do want to say to everybody listening to this, seek help.
Hmm.
Seek help. Seek a coach, seek a therapist. Nobody does this alone. And if you are having thoughts that hurt you constantly, oh, I'm fat, or I'm this, she won't hire me, oh, whatever it is, seek help to get out of there because you need help to identify when that voice is talking. I love the question that your therapist asks you. Why do you have thoughts that hurt you? For my clients, I say, is that true? Ask the voice, is that true? I can't do this. Is that true? And if it is true, is that the only truth? Because maybe a good Google search would help you overcome what you don't know for that job. Maybe getting a mentor, getting a coach will help you go over the top. Generally, the only things that will hurt you that are actually true are the things you fall for the okey doke and you don't try.
Mm,
And you don't try.
yeah.
And as Black women, we have all the things white women have to limit you in the world. But then we have to add beyond misogyny, we have to add racism. Beyond racism, we have to add family stories. And we all have a family story that's in the way of our progress. And then beyond all of that, we feel so crushed when we're fired or failed because we think we're supposed to be superwoman. And so instead of brushing it off, we carry it around. And so my job is to show you what you're carrying around and give you the tools or the words that you can just let it go. You can say to it, well, that happened. That was interesting. And then you keep moving. You keep moving. And another piece I insist on my clients to figure out how to do is a period of sacred rest. And I call it sacred rest because it's on your calendar. It's
Mm,
not to be moved. Mine is all day Sunday. I don't have time for it during the week, but I do have time for 3-minute meditations. I do have time, 20 minutes between clients, so that I'm not moving from one thing to another. Because if I can't rejuvenate the body, I'm not going to be steady in the mind.
That's a good. That's a good point, because that's where I was going to ask you next, just about the impact of the mental well-being and its impact on the physical
Exactly.
well-being. And
Exactly.
so we sometimes as women continue to do when maybe it's time to stop.
Well, you know what? You could actually do if you are strategic about what you're doing. You're not
Mm,
just doing things by rote. Why are you still doing that? Why are you still doing it like that? How come the kids can't make their own breakfast? It's those sorts of things you have to reevaluate.
mhm,
Why am I doing this in this job? How come John's not doing his part on this job? Things you have to reevaluate what you're actually doing, but understanding if your automobile runs out of gasoline, that car's not going. And so when you take the time, you tell the husband, you tell the kids, you tell the job, I need sacred rest. And it could be anything from a hot bath, the shower with the shower bombs that give you some aromatherapy. It could be a yoga class. It could be a glass of wine and Netflix. But you're not on your phone. You're not also having the papers you have to mark for work or grade those papers. Is your sacred rest.
mm.
And I always ask my clients to have your journal nearby so that you can start thinking about your brain's not going to shut down. You're just slowing it down so your cells can regenerate, and then you can have creative space.
You talked about the woman herself being in an environment that may not be supportive,
Hmm.
but there are women who may own businesses. You know, they're not the executive leadership client of yours, but they're in an environment where they're working with other women and may not understand the tools that they need to put in place to make their employees feel supportive. Do you address issues like that as well, or is it
Oh,
just for
yes,
the
yes, yes. I
individual?
have
Hmm.
entrepreneurs that I work with over
Hmm.
the years who are figuring out how to have a healthy environment
Hmm.
around them, the women who work with them, and to back down these notions that women are always confrontational with each other. Women are always in competition with each other. And that there's a certain mindset of being a leader that you can't be loving, you can't embrace people, and you can't show your weaknesses. People like to work for humans, not machines. And that just because you show a weakness doesn't mean you're not strong, doesn't mean you're not determined, not doesn't mean you're not brilliant at this work. But nobody gets here without fumbling. Nobody gets here without falling down. I mean, it's hard to tell people that I had a period of time where 2 years I was on welfare. I came out of my divorce. I went on welfare. I got food stamps, but I found it to be a wonderful period of reevaluating my whole thing.
Mm.
So I decided I would rather do this than work in newsrooms. I decided I would rather be of direct service. So I want to do human rights communications, which is where, my Trans Africa work, my work with Harry Belafonte and Danny Glover. But I needed that period of what the world would look like. She has failed to rejuvenate me, to be brave
Mhm.
enough to take the next step. Brave enough coming through my inner critic, doing all these voices that say, oh my God, Joia, you have messed it up. You know, but I didn't mess it up. That period was over. I needed a period to decide what is my next service? What do I do next? And then out of the human rights communications work into the coaching. Just a year of looking like I'd messed it up. And my inner critic kept telling me that until I got a hold of her. I can let her know she's safe. I'm not going to make a move that will make us homeless. Or I take a small baseball bat and I beat her across the head. Either way, she's got to shut up for me to do what I'm brought here to do. And I say
Right.
for all women of color, you have a reason to be here. And are you in the way of that?
Wow.
Are you in the
Let
way of
me
it?
Let me ask, before we run out of time here,
Mhm.
because there are women who are mothers listening. There are women who are teachers in classrooms with
Yeah.
young girls, and I'm talking about young girls. We're raising a generation right now that's so stuck on social media that it's shaping them in ways that we may not all appreciate. I'll put it that
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
So if you are in one of those roles, you're a mentor, what have you, is there anything you would, and there's a lot of free advice you're giving us today, and I appreciate it.
Oh, you can have it, Denise. Anything for you. You know that. Anything for you. And it's really important to me
Yeah.
to do as many interviews, as many of these that I possibly can, so that
Okay.
I can get the word out.
Right.
So it's
Right.
not free advice. It's not mine to own. It is, I'm supposed to do this.
Wonderful.
And I
Yeah.
thank you for this opportunity. But to answer your question, you know, the ideal question is you don't get social media until you're 14 or 15 years old. So did you have time to build your own base of who you are? You are
Mhm.
the most confused between like 8 and 14. Totally confused. Hormones are going crazy. You don't know where you fit in the world. Sally doesn't like me. All of those things. And then you have to compare yourself with these pencil thin girls on the media, or the girls who have 6,000 followers, and we think that makes her popular, which it doesn't. It just means that she's offering something that people want to look at. And some of it's part of her body, some of it is she's doing something ridiculous and people want to look at. It has nothing to do with her. Nobody knows her. So since we can't take social media, because a lot of people, their kids have to have phones, they're latchkey kids, really young, they have to get phones. I get that. But I think as the parent, as the mentor, as the teacher, as the elder, it's important for us to help these girls build a foundation of self-worth.
Mm.
We have to, despite you working 3 jobs to keep the door, keep the roof over our heads, your daughter has to find a way, and your son have to find a way to love themselves, even with the global comparisons that are happening. So you have to tell your daughter she's the queen and demonstrate for her that she's the queen just as she is, that she was worthy at conception, just as she is. And it doesn't matter whether she gets an A or a D, that does not take away from her worth. She just has to study harder. That's
Wow.
not a worth thing. And if we can establish to our young Black girls their worth, then maybe we have fewer babies from girls who are trying to get love out of a boy who has 6 other girls he's sleeping with.
Mm.
Maybe we can figure out how we can give wealth to ourselves and worth to ourselves with withstanding the comparisons. Then I think we have another generation behind us that can stand up, like the Fannie Lou Hamers and the Shirley Chisholms. But it won't be 1, 2, 3 here. It's not the talented 10th. It will be a generation.
Wow. Yeah. Joia, Jefferson, Nuri, thank you so very much for being with me
Denise, thank
today.
you for having me. And
I
your
mean, quite,
producer is magnificent.
oh yeah.
I spent that 30 years as a producer. She's on top of it.
Oh
Chef,
yeah.
you are doing a job here.
I love her. I love her. We have our moments, but we certainly do try to lift each other up as well.
Well,
And
you know what? That's
appreciate
work.
her. It
That's
is.
relationships.
That's right. Yes, it
Every
is. It's
relationship
good. If we
has
can,
moments like, what the hell? You know, but
both
you
ways.
stay together and you create the product, and you are
Exactly.
doing that. So
Yeah. Thanks for shouting
my
her
hats
out.
off.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
my hat's off to you.
So we may have you back, another time and talk some more because I think this is great. If there are people out there that are listening, well, first, how can they contact you? I think we put something up, but let's put that up again.
Well, my
Um,
company is called In the Public. My company is called In the Public Eye Coaching. So you
mhm.
can find me at inthepubliceyecoaching.com, or you can find me at LinkedIn with my full name, Joia Jefferson Nuri, and Nuri spelled Nuri.
Wonderful.
So, and I have a podcast called Unshackled Leadership,
Oh,
a
okay.
lantern for Black women. And we are now in the middle of our second year, and we are bringing in thousands of listeners on this continent. And it's the #1 show under business in Kenya. And it's called Unshackled Leadership, a lantern for Black women. It's on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast.
Okay.
But you have to put in the whole name, Unshackled Leadership, because somebody else has that, colon, a lantern for Black women. And I have to say that the show is dedicated to my hero, Harriet Tubman.
Wow.
Because
Wonderful.
she was a lantern for us in the dark.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
I hope you will tune into the podcast. Just listen to a couple of episodes and see if it resonates with you. But it's always a conversation that empowers the sisterhood.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us, Joia. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you soon.
All righty.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye, audience.